Hi everybody, welcome to Mastering the Nik Collection. From beginner to expert, I'm Mark Wallace. I'm a portrait photographer who's been shooting for about 30 years. I started with analog film in California in the 80s, and then I migrated to portrait photography. I created Adorama TV in 2010. I'm a regular contributor on Creative Live, and I've been traveling the world for the last 10 years doing street photography, portraiture, and travel photography. I've been using the Nik Collection for about the same amount of time. I absolutely love it. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about using the Nik Collection. You're going to begin as a beginner and end as an expert. This session is an overview of the Nik Collection. So if you've never used the Nik Collection before, this is the session for you. We're going to look at all of the apps. But if you're a current user of the Nik Collection, we have advanced topics. So there are a bunch of sessions dedicated to each app in the collection. So you might want to jump right over there. We're going to cover it all. Before we dive into these apps, I think it's a great idea to understand the history of the Nik Collection and how we got here. It all started in 1995 in Hamburg, Germany, when two buddies got together and they started creating software that allowed us to use filters like the Nik filters as a plugin in Photoshop. So that was Niels Kokemore and Klaus Golker. They started this whole show. And they worked on the software until about 2004 when they created Nik Color Efex Pro 2.0 in collaboration with Nikon. So it was Nik and Nikon working together, and they created what is now U-Point technology. It revolutionized digital image editing because it was the first time that you could just put a point on an image and do local adjustments really easily. In fact, things got so good that they just kept going, and in 2006 they introduced the Nik Collection as we know it today. And in 2012, Google noticed and said, this is so good, we want it. And so Google acquired it to be used in their Snapseed software. And a lot of people noticed. In fact, so many people noticed that in 2016, Google said everybody can have the software for free. But all things don't last forever, and in 2017, Google said, hey, we can't keep up with this. We can't release things that are compatible with latest operating systems and patches and all of that stuff. And so that's where DxO comes in. DxO took over the maintenance and the development of the Nik Collection, and they released a new update that was compatible with the latest operating systems, that was compatible with Photoshop and Lightroom Classic and all these external editors, and they just kept going. They just kept adding new versions, new compatibility updates, and now we are at the very best that the Nik Collection has ever been. There are new features. There's a new HSL feature. There are new control lines in addition to control points. It's more compatible. It's more functional than it's ever been before. Now that we know the history of the Nik Collection, let's take a look from a high level at what each of these apps do. Starting with Nik Color Efex. Color Efex has 58 filters that you can mix and match to create unlimited looks. You can control color, tone, contrast, and more. Nik Silver Efex is darkroom inspired black and white editing. You can emulate traditional film, grain, and emulsion. You have color filters. It's really the ultimate tool for black and white editing. Nik Analog Efex is that bygone era of analog film editing. And so we can look at vintage effects. We can add bokeh, texture like photo plates, dirt and scratches, and light leaks, and film grain, and all the fun stuff that made analog photography amazing. Nik Viveza gives you color and tonal control of your images. You can adjust blacks, midtones, highlight, contrast. You can make sure your colors and your hues are exactly right. You can quickly manipulate your images for maximum punch. Nik Define removes digital noise without destroying any detail. It gives new life to those noisy high ISO images. Nik Pre-Sharpener and Sharpener Output allows you to sharpen your images either before you start editing or at final output. If you're sharpening your images for a large print or a small print or on screen, those are all different settings, but Sharpener Output can make sure you get the exact right amount of sharpening without overdoing it. Nik HDR Efex is high dynamic range processing. From the darkest darks to the brightest brights, you can combine these to get gorgeous high dynamic range images. You can do that by using multiple images to combine them into a single HDR image, or you can do single image processing for extreme tonal control. Nik Perspective allows you to fix optical distortions of all kinds. You can fix lens distortions, or if you have geometric perspective issues, you can fix those. You can think of Nik Perspective like an electronic tilt shift lens, and you can use the reshape tool to adjust the shape of almost anything. Now that we know the Nik Collection is made up of 8 different apps, do you use these as standalone apps or do you use them as plugins? Well, that's up to you. You can use them either way. If you decide you want to use them as standalone apps, they will work flawlessly. But if you want even more power from the Nik Collection, you want to use these with other apps, including Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Lightroom Classic, DxO Pure Raw, DxO Photolab, and Affinity Photo. The Nik Collection is totally compatible with all of those applications. Not only is Nik 6.3 compatible with those applications, it's compatible with older versions of Nik itself. And this is perfect if you want to have a parallel install, meaning Nik 6.3 and an older version like Nik 3, Nik 4, or Nik 5. And you can do that if you're learning Nik 6 and you want to have that safety net to fall back on, or maybe you have the trial version of Nik 6.3 and you want to play with that with the ability of going back and forth between the older and the newer version. You can do that. In fact, let me show you exactly how that works. When you install Nik 6.3, it automatically preserves your older version of your Nik Collection. And you can see that if you go into your applications folder, you have the Nik Collection with all the older applications. So I've got Analog Effects Pro and Silver Effects Pro. So those are my old Nik software. And then I have the newer Nik software right here, but it also updates both Lightroom and Photoshop, and so the plugins behave correctly. So if I go in and right click on an image and I can say edit in, you'll notice that I have both the older and the newer versions of the Nik Collection. And if I go over into Photoshop, so I have my new Nik Collection palette from 6.3, but if I click on filter, you can see I have my legacy Nik Collection here, Viveza 2 and Silver Effects Pro, all those older applications, and my new 6.3 apps side by side, so I can bounce back and forth between those two. That's a lot of information, but now it's time to start looking at the apps themselves, beginning with the interface. The nice thing about Nik 6 is the interface is consistent across all of the apps. So once you understand that, you're at the beginner level, you can dive in and start editing right away. So let's take a look. I have the same image loaded in each of the apps. And what we can do is you can see that there is a consistency to all of this software. So I have Nik 6 Viveza open, but if I go over here to Output Sharpener, you can see that the top menu in the right looks about the same. If I go to Color Effects Pro, it looks the same. If I go to Define, it looks the same. HDR Effects, etc. As I'm zipping through these different apps, it's hard to tell that I'm changing apps because they all have the same interface. And so what I want to do is show you this interface. Beginning at the top, we'll look at the side panels and we'll show you between these different apps how they all behave in a similar way. So at the very top here, we have some viewing options. The first one is this compare module. Right now, we can't compare it with anything because we haven't changed anything. So I'm just going to click on a button over here on the left. I'll explain what that is in a second. And then what we can do is if I hit this compare button, before and after, before and after, you can see what we've done. We're comparing that image, and that is true across all the apps. We also have this split view right here. And so what I can do is I can drag this to the left or to the right, and you can see what effect has been made based on the filters or plugins that I've used. The other thing we have is this right here, and you can see a before and after image. I can click this little button right here to see left and right, top to bottom. That little button also exists in the slider, so instead of going left to right, I can click this and slide this top to bottom, so that works just fine. The other thing that we can use here is this zoom. So right now, we've fitted this image in the screen, but I can click fill, it will fill the screen. I can hit 1:1, that's a 100% zoom. And then over on the right, we have some preset zoom options. So by default, it's 2:1, which is 200%, but you can choose 3:1, that's 300%, or 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, or 1/8. So it's up to you. You can choose whatever one you want. If you want to see this zoomed out, maybe show half size or a quarter size. I like to have this set to 2:1, 200%. So I have fit, fill, 100%, and 200%, but the choice is up to you. The other thing you probably noticed is over here on the right, we have this little navigator window. So whatever's inside this white box, When you drag that over, that's what's going to show up inside this window. The other thing you can do to get a better view is if you hit the tab button, you can make the side panels disappear, hit the tab button, and those will come back again. Or if you just want one panel to go away, there's this little triangle here. You can click that and it will go away. Click it again and it'll come back. And also on the right-hand side, click, click, and that works just great. Okay, on the left-hand side, we have some really interesting things. So in each of the apps, we have what are called presets. Some apps have filters or cameras. Basically what these are the things that you're choosing to add to your image that you're later going to adjust. So it might be a contrast filter, and then you'll adjust how much contrast. Or it might be a warming filter, then you'll adjust how warm or how cool. The other thing that we have on the left is some predefined combinations of filters. Let's take a look. So in Viveza, we have 14 different presets. We have neutral, which is by default how your image comes in. And then we have a bunch of different options here that you can choose from. So we have tonal adjustments, soften skin. These are preset formulas that you can work with. You can warm it up. Let's click on that and you can see that the image warms up. As soon as you click on something on the left-hand side, it shows up on the right-hand side so that you can start adjusting the different settings. So depending on whatever you click on the left, you will have different options on the right. If you click on warm it up, you'll have more warmth over here. If I click adjust foreground, you'll see that I've got different options. So we have presets. We also have custom presets. And so these are presets that you make. And so if you've created some really interesting look that you love and you want to keep forever, you can create a custom preset. We're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. I'll show you how to do that, but they are there on the left-hand side. In fact, I'm going to zip over to a different app, Color Efex, because it's a little bit more robust. We have a few more options over here on the left-hand side. But you'll notice that it sort of didn't look like we changed apps, but we did because the interface performs the exact same way. So on this one, we have 58 different filters. We have 55 filters on the left and 3 that are always there. And so what we can do is we can use these panels right here, these buttons. They've pre-sorted some of the filters. So if we want stuff that deals with macro photography, we can click on macro. Stuff that deals with portraits, we can click on portraits. If we want to see all of the filters, just click on all and it shows up. There's another thing here that will show up in all of the apps. That's this little star. Those are my favorites. So I know I'm using contrast only a lot. I know I'm using detail extractor a lot or dynamic skin softener. So instead of having to sort through all of these different filters, if there's something that you like using, like this reflector effects, click on the star. Now it's yellow. And if you want to just see your favorites, click on the favorites. And that's all you're going to see. You can also see which filters you've recently used. So that just sort of helps us sort through there. So we have our filters, we have our presets just like before. So you get a thumbnail so you can sort of see what this is going to look like. And so in this app and other apps, a preset is a combination of filters. So instead of one filter, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 mixed together and you can save all those as a preset. Or with these presets, DxO has done it for you. And so you can see I click on the left, I get a bunch of options on the right. As we go down the left-hand side, we can also see custom presets. These are presets that we will create. We're going to do that in a few minutes. And then there's this imported section. It's empty right now, but this is where you can share presets with your friends and coworkers and family and whoever you want. So if you've created a preset that you love, you can save it. Other people can just load it right in. We're going to also do that in a few minutes. There are 2 other sections here that are really important. This one is called Last Edits. And so you can see that we have these different thumbnails that look interesting, and then they have some numbers underneath. What this is saying is the last time I used Nik 6 Color Efex and I saved my image, the application is automatically going to save all the adjustments I made as a last edit. So you can see here that on June 14th at 12 o'clock and 37 seconds, I saved an image with these settings. And so this is going to save the last 10 or 15 of your edits. And so you can always go back to that. So if you forgot to save a preset, you can say, you know what, a few days ago I edited an image, I just want to use those same settings. They are there, so you can click on that and automatically apply whatever those settings are to your image. It's really cool. And then lastly, on the left-hand side, we have this. This is our history. And so it does exactly what you would think. So if I change some of these different settings over on the right, you can see that they're showing up on the left here. So I can say, you know what, I didn't mean to do this saturation. Let's undo that. Let's undo this, or let's go forward. If you're familiar with the history palette in Photoshop, it behaves exactly the same. And so this only works for the active session. As soon as you save your image and exit and come back, this history is going to reset. But it will show you everything that you've done in the current editing session. It's pretty cool. Okay, on the right-hand side, we have a few more things that we need to look at. At the very top, we have this loop. And what this is, it's a 100% view of the wherever my mouse is. So as I move the mouse around, you can see it shows me the microphone at 100%. And notice there's a little line in there. So let me show you what that line is. It will work if I add a filter. So I'm going to use a preset here and change this to something pretty radical. Let's do spring, boom. Okay, so now when I put my mouse over the nose, notice that on the left, that's the before state, and on the right, that's the after. What if you just want to have a look at a specific space so that as you're editing the image, it's always there? That's what this little pen is. So I can take this pen, bring it over, maybe I'll put it on the edge of this microphone, and now it doesn't matter where I'm moving my mouse, this stays the same. So now as I'm changing things, you can see that the after is here, the before is here. This is updating. I don't have to keep going back over here. This is great for sharpening or detailed work, something like that. I'm going to unpin this. Notice that there's also a pin up here. So what happens is if I start getting a lot of filters or presets, I'm going to add just a bunch here. This probably isn't going to look very good in our image because I'm just doing this at random. That's interesting. So what will happen is you can see that as I have more and more filters, my loop and my histogram up here go away when I scroll down. If I want those to be there all the time, which usually I do, I'm going to click that pen and now my filters will scroll, but my loop and histogram stay put, which is great. Speaking of histogram, let's talk about that. So this histogram here, in fact, I'm going to undo all this stuff I did, which is great. I have a history palette. So I'm going to go in here and click on the original image, take that back. So now we can see this histogram over here. We can see an RGB histogram that's red, green, and blue. I can just show the red or the green or the blue channel or just luminosity. So I'm not looking at individual color channels. I'm just looking at the overall brightness and darkness of the image. I can choose that. So that is a really helpful tool when you're editing. And then also we have these two little squares up here. And so those squares allow us to check if we have any clipping in our image. Clipping happens when you have too much contrast. So you have areas of your image that are absolutely black. There's no graduations. There's no difference in the blackness. It's totally black, or on the opposite side, totally white. Sometimes you don't want that because when you print things, it looks pretty yucky. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to go into my filters here, and I'm going to grab one of my favorite filters, which is levels and curves. And then I'm going to click on this left-hand square here. Now watch what happens as I start adding blacks here. All this white area here is telling me that in this part of the image, there is no detail. It's totally black. And the colored areas here, this yellow and red and green, saying that's almost totally black. Be careful, it's giving me warnings. And then on the other side, if I click on this side, I'm going to do the exact opposite. So if I bring this over, this black area is saying this is clipped on the white side. So there's no detail there. It's totally white. So you might want to watch out when you print this. There's no detail at all there. So we have our view options at the top. We have our filters and our presets and our history on the left. And depending on what we do on the left, we have all of our adjustments that we can make on the right. And that's all there is to it. There are some things at the bottom that are really important. We have non-destructive edits and save preset. And so we're going to talk about save preset a little bit later, but right now I want to talk about this thing right here, this non-destructive edits larger file. So as you're editing images in the Nik collection, you might want to go back 6 months, a year, 2 years later and load in an image and make adjustments. And so that's what non-destructive editing is. You want to remember all the things that you did, all the filters that you added, so maybe you can change them, tweak them, or undo them. If you click this button, you have the option of doing that. So I have this clicked. So if I go up here and click File, Save Image As, then I'm going to go and I'm going to put this just right on my desktop in my workshop images. And then I'll rename this something like Test Image. And then I will save that. I want to save this as a TIFF file, not as a JPEG, as a TIFF file. So I have those options. Then I'm going to hit save. Now watch what happens. If I go back and if I open a different image in Nik Color 6, so I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to open a different file by dragging and dropping that in. So I've got this image. Okay, that's really cool. But now 6 months have passed, and what I want to do is I want to open that image that I just did before. And so what I'm going to do is go into my test image here, drag that over. So I'm loading that in. Notice these crazy things I did with the levels and curves are still there. So if I want to, I can get rid of that. I can do some other work. I can keep editing this image, and then I can save that as many times as I want. As long as it's non-destructive, then I have the option to change that. Okay, now that we know about the interface, let's talk about those presets and why they're so special. In order to understand exactly what presets are, we're going to create one together. You can follow along at home. And so what we first need to do is open Viveza. I have that open here on my computer. And then in your downloads, and when you downloaded the class, there was a folder called Workshop Images. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to that folder, Workshop Images, and you can see inside that folder, there is a folder for each class. And so we're in the introduction right now. Just go in there and open that. And then there is a gold microphone. And so what we want to do is take that and just drag it over into Viveza, and that will open the file. Or you can use File Open, or you can use Command or Control O, however you want to do it. It's pretty simple. Okay, now that we have this, what we want to do is to make some changes to make this sort of glowing. So I'm going to go over here on the right-hand side, and I'm going to use my own settings. I'm not going to use a preset for this. I'm going to do this on my own. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my brightness just a bit. We're just going to play with this until we get something that looks pretty good. This needs a bit of contrast. Let's add a bit of that. I think this needs some saturation. Then we also need a little bit of structure. You can play with this at home. But one of the things I love about this is when we warm it up. So I'm going to start warming this up, giving that glow there. Maybe that's a little too much, something like that. And then I think we'll take the blues, something like that. And so we're just going to play with this. And so we have that. We want to go in here, maybe take our highlights down just a bit, take our midtones up just a bit. You get the idea. So we're just sort of playing with these different settings here. Maybe we'll click this button for white balance here. By the way, you notice that when I click this triangle here, it shows and hides things here. So I can take this temperature. Now we're getting some of that gold tone. I really like some of that. And then let's just go in here to our levels and curves. And let's just bring that up just a little bit. So you can play with this at home. I'm just making some really quick changes, and you can see that we're getting some interesting effects. Okay, let's say this is an effect that we like. Is it? Well, we can hit the compare. There's before, there's after. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So on the right-hand side, we have this option to click Save Presets. And you'll notice we have two options here. One is to enter the name for our new preset, and the other is Save with Local Adjustments. So to begin with, let's just name this. So I'm going to name this Gold Microphone, and then I'm going to save this. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see Gold Microphone shows up. And there's some options for using this that I'm going to explain here in a little bit. But remember, when we had that save preset, we had the option to save local adjustments. What is that? Well, let me show you. Now, this is something that we are going to dive in at length here in just a couple minutes, but right now, just follow along. So it's a selective adjustment. In other words, I'm going to select one part of my image, not the whole image, just a part of that. It's a selective adjustment. So I'm going to click this little dot here. This is called a control point. I'm going to click that. Then I'm going to go over here to my microphone. I'm going to click on my microphone. And now we have this little circle. I'm going to explain all of this later, so don't worry about it right now. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start making adjustments, and notice that it's starting to make adjustments to this microphone. In fact, I'm going to take this luminance and chrominance, slide that just a little bit. I'm going to change this structure just a little bit. Yeah, in fact, a lot. It doesn't matter what I'm doing right now. All that you need to know is I'm making a selective adjustment, something to the microphone and nothing else. So now we can see that when I click this little check mark here, see how that microphone lights up and nothing else does? I've made an adjustment. This is UPoint technology, just to the microphone and nothing else, by just pointing at it and saying, hey, the microphone's what I want to adjust. I'm going to show you how to do that here in a second. How cool is that? Now, that's what that Save Selective Adjustments option is all about. It's asking me, when I save this preset, do I want to save this adjustment along with the whole thing? You might not want to save those because in this example, I have a singer with the microphone. I like the overall look. Maybe I have some more images that have that overall look, but I probably don't have one that has her with the microphone, so I don't need that local adjustment. Or maybe I have a series of photos of her and the microphone, so maybe I do want to save that. You have the option. What if I've already made a preset and now I want to update it? Because I do now. I want this local adjustment to be saved. So all I have to do is go down to that preset that I created, this gold microphone, and there's this little loopy arrow right there. If I click on that, it's going to say, do you want to update this with your current settings? I do. And also, I want to update it with my local adjustments. Yes. So now this gold microphone has that setting. In fact, we can prove it. I can just click on any of these other settings here. And when I come back and click on gold microphone, my settings are there and my little local adjustment, my selective adjustment, is included. What if I want to share this with a friend? So what if I have my friend down the street and they're like, I wish I had that preset? You can. So that's what this little square with the arrow is. You can export that. So you click on that. Then I'm just going to go to my desktop here, my working folder that I put on my desktop. And I'm going to open that. When I say open, it exports that file. So if I go to my Finder, and I go to that working folder, you can see that there is an actual file there that says goldenmicrophone.json. So that is the preset. If, for example, I am that friend and I want to use that preset, so I'm going to delete this. That's what that other icon is, this little trash. Do you want to delete this? Yes, I want to delete this. Okay, let's say that it's a year later and I'm like, I wish I had that preset. Well, guess what? I can go down here to my imported and I can say import preset. Then I can go to the folder where I've saved that preset and then open it. And there is our preset that I've imported, and that's what that imported tab is for on the left-hand side. So if you're working in a group or a team, or you just want to archive a bunch of presets, you have the option to do that. You can create as many presets as you want. It's infinite amount. You can save those to a hard drive, and then you can always bring those back in. So you don't have to worry about deleting presets if you've saved them somewhere else. It's really pretty amazing. Now we know how to use presets. I'm going to be using these throughout the advanced classes. You'll see me save time by just clicking on a custom preset that I've already created. The good news is in your workshop files, there are folders that say presets. So all the presets that I've created for this tutorial, you can load in and use them as you follow along at home. Now what we need to do is we need to learn about UPoint technology. So I'm going to give you an overview of how this works, and then there are even more tutorials as we get into the advanced classes. So if you haven't already, open Viveza and then let's hop in. We're going to go over to our workshop images folder on your computer and then go into introduction. And then what we want to do is go into this folder that says Quinn, and then we will use Quinn Profile. So drag Quinn Profile onto Viveza, and we have this image here. This is a preset I use to color correct this image for the sake of this tutorial. So I'm going to click on that. That just gives her a little bit better color and it's brighter. The big issue with this image is I know Quinn and she's got these amazing green eyes, and in this image they look gray. So what I want to do is I want to make a selective adjustment to her eyes and nothing else. This is the most basic type of selective adjustment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 1:1 to go full screen, so 100% to look at her eyes, and we want to work on this color of her eyes. So to do that, we're going to go over to the right under selective adjustments, and then we have a control point. Click on that, then you're going to drag that control point not in the middle of the eye, not on the reflection of the softbox, but on the color of her eye. That's important because the way that control points and control lines select things are two distinct characteristics: color and luminosity. The color of something and how bright or how dark it is. And so what we want to do is we want to select the color of her eyes, and so this dot is on her eye. So I'm going to click right here, and as soon as I do that, you see a bunch of stuff show up on the screen. Let me explain the bunch of stuff. We have this circle right here, and then we have this antenna looking thing. In fact, it's called the antenna. The circle is where we begin to end what we're looking for. That sounds confusing. Let me explain that. So you might think that this control point, if I put it there, it's looking at everything inside the circle and nothing outside the circle. But that's not how it works. This circle is the boundary where the end begins. And so this will make sense in a second, trust me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the circle down to about right here. Now this is going to make sense because notice the eyeball up here is outside the circle, and then some of the eyeball is inside the circle. And so watch what happens. On the right hand side over here we have control point 1. That doesn't mean anything to me, so I'm going to double click that and rename this right eye. You want to name your control points because you might have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 like layers in Photoshop, and if you come back to an image later on, you won't know what's what if you haven't labeled it. Notice that there's this little 4% here. That's showing us how large this circle is. So as I grow that up, 16% all the way back down to 4%. Just gives you an idea of how much of the image this little circle is covering. On the right of that is this little box. This is going to show us what's selected and what isn't. So if I click on that, anything that's selected is going to show up white. That's what is going to be adjusted when I start making adjustments to this point. Anything that's black is not selected. But notice stuff outside the circle is white. So there's some stuff outside the circle that's still selected, including the eye and her eyelashes and some other things. What if we want to refine this? We don't want to adjust her eyelashes. We just want to adjust the color of her eye. So I can do that in several ways: luminance, chrominance, and diffusion. These three sliders, that's all you need to make those selective adjustments. Luminance says, hey, where I've put that dot, how close do the other things that are selected have to be to the same brightness level? If I slide it to the right, I'm saying they have to be really close. So if this is white, they have to be white. If it's black, they have to be black. If it's in the middle, it could be gray. It could be sort of close. So the more I put to the right, more at 100%, the more exact the brightness levels have to match. The same thing is true of the chrominance. That's how close do the colors have to match wherever I've put the dot. So if I put the dot on the green and I slide that all the way to 100%, that means only select this exact green and nothing else. If I have it at maybe 50%, it's this green and maybe a little brighter green, a little darker green, something that's a little bit different hue. And so you can be as exact or as liberal as you'd like to be. And then we're going to get to diffusion in a second. So what we're going to do here is first let's go to chrominance. We'll slide it to the right. Notice as we slide to the right, we're only seeing the eyeball because the eyelashes and everything else are a different color. So we're intelligently saying what to use. Luminance, as I slide that to the right, we're only getting that brightness level of the green in her eye. We're only seeing her eye. So I'm going to turn off this mask. And now we're going to go down here. We want to adjust the green. So in the color selectivity, that's how much is selected. And then basic adjustments is what we are adjusting. So I'm going to take the green. We're going to overdo it. I'm going to go to the right quite a bit. Notice nothing else is changing, just her eye. I can change the saturation. I can change the brightness and contrast, maybe the structure. I have all these different adjustments for just this one selected point, and I'm not doing anything else but making her eyeball green as it should be. I also have a control over here, this little checkbox next to the right eye control point. I can turn on and off that control point to see what I've done. So I have a compare. That's what I've done before. This is without it, this is with it. So I can sort of look and see if I'm getting something that I want. So that's how that works. Again, notice that the circle doesn't have all of her eye included, but the selection does. This circle is just saying, focus here, look outside just a little bit, but this is where we want to begin our search. We can change that behavior though by using diffusion, this diffusion slider. So again, I'm going to turn on the mask, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to not make it as specific of a selection so we can sort of see how this works. If I take the diffusion, right now it's at 100%, meaning fade out, fade the selection out. Be very soft with this selection. If I go down to 0, it's only staying inside the circle. So if I say only inside the circle, don't fade out, I put my diffusion at 0. If I bring this up higher and higher, then those edges get softer and softer. That's how that circle works. So with those three things, luminance, chrominance, and diffusion, you can change how much or how little is selected in your control point. So we have that green. Usually, by the way, all you have to do is click on something, a couple of quick slides, and it's done. You'll get to the point where these selections take you 3 or 4 seconds because there's only 3 sliders to worry about: chrominance, luminance, and diffusion. That's it, and the size of the circle. Let's talk a little bit more about this circle and these things here on this antenna, because it looks like an old school antenna. So I've been controlling things with these sliders over here on the right side, the luminance, the chrominance, the diffusion, and all these different adjustments. You can do it right here on the control point itself. If I want to change the size of the circle to say, hey, this is what we're pointing at, I can drag that by dragging on the circle itself, or I can use this top little antenna here and drag that. And so I have the option. I also have the option of changing luminance, chrominance, diffusion right here on the slider. Same with brightness and contrast and all of these other changes. I can do that right here, or I can do it on the right hand side. It's up to you how you'd like to do it. For me, I don't like all of these different things getting in the way of my image. I want to see the image, but I don't have to worry about that because on the right hand side, over here on selective adjustments, notice there's this little antenna icon. If I click on that, it's got a slash through it now. Now my control point won't show the antenna. So that's my preference, is to not show the antenna and only play with this thing on the right. But if you like using the antenna, you can turn it on or off, and you can do it however you want. Okay, now what we have is we have one eye of Quinn that's green and the other one that's gray. We need both eyes to be the same, and we want to have one control to change both eyes. It's really easy to do that. So what I could do is click this and create another control point, or I can just click this, hit Option and hold it, and then when I drag this over, all my settings have gone with it. I've created a copy of my first control point. So you can hit Control or Option and drag, and all the settings that you've made are going to be brought with it. You can see here that her hair is green. We don't want that, so let's shrink this. There we go. And so now it's only going to be on her eye right here. and we've restored this area. So now we have 2 control points. So control point 2, let's call that left eye. What if I want to change the color of both of her eyes at the same time? I don't have to go between those 2 control points. What I can do is I can use my shift key. I've got left eye selected, hit shift, and then I will select right eye at the same time, and then I can click this icon right here, which is group selected points. Now I've got a group, so I'm going to call this eyes. Now notice I have this green slider. I can change it, and both of her eyes are changing at the same time. And so that's a great way to adjust different areas in your image that are similar without having to go to each control point and do that. You can just group everything. If you want to ungroup that to maybe make a fine adjustment to something, then you just go to that icon. It's got a little X now. Click that, and your group opens up, and you can do whatever you want. We know about control points, but there's a different selective adjustment called a control line, and this is fantastic for scenic photography because it's great for selecting things like the sky, where you say, here's a line, everything above the line, we're going to change things up there, but nothing below the line. Sort of think of it like a graduated neutral density filter that maybe you've had in your bag for many years. We're going to show you that right now. So open Nik Color Efex. I've already got it open on my desktop. We're going to go into our workshop files. So I'm going to go into my workshop images, into the introduction, and then in the Machu Picchu folder, there's a Machu Picchu image. Drag that over. So once that's in there, we're going to do some things. So I want to use a DxO preset to bring some punch to this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this clarity bump. This is built into Color Efex. So I'm just going to click on that, and that adds a little bit of goodness. I'm going to warm this up by taking my warmth up to about, I don't know, 20%, something like that. And then my dynamic contrast, I'll take that up just a little bit. Okay, so that just makes this image look a little bit more pleasing as a baseline. So we did that to the entire image. You can see before and after looks a little bit better. But the sky, bleh, we need something there. We don't want to adjust the entire image, we just want to adjust the sky. This is a perfect place for a control line. So I'm going to go to my filters. Remember, we're going to go in depth in each of these apps. So in Color Efex, we're going to go in depth with all these filters and things. So don't worry if this is new to you. So I have some favorites selected here. And so the one that I'm going to use is called Contrast Only. So if you don't have that selected, you can just go alphabetically to Contrast Only. There is a little plus there. Click on that plus, and then Contrast Only is being applied. Notice right away, though, it's being applied to the entire image. We don't want that. We just want it to be applied to the sky. So inside this filter on the right-hand side, we have our selective adjustments. A control point, and then over here, this different icon, this is called a control line. So click on that control line, bring it out, and then click again. And it just looks like a very thin, wonky line. So the best way to do that, I'm going to delete this by hitting the delete key. Are you sure? Yes. With the control line, the best way to do that is to drag. So click that, bring it out, and then click and hold, and then drag. So then what you're doing, I still am holding down my mouse. I can set the angle of the line, and I can also set how far apart these 2 lines are. So these 2 lines define where the filter fades out. So the filter is going to be applied above the line, and then it's going to fade out, and there's nothing going to be below the line. So if I have these far apart, that fade is going to be much more gradual. If I have them close together, that fade is going to be much more abrupt. If I want to change the angle of the line, I can click on this little dot here, and it pivots on the other dot. Notice there's a little arrow there on the middle dot. That arrow is pointing to where the filter fades out. So the arrow is pointing to where the filter is not going to be affected. So I'm going to bring this down just a little bit, make sure that it is around the top of these mountains. The other thing that we have here is this little eyedropper here. And that eyedropper is telling us where we want to select our luminosity and our chrominance. So on the control point, the point said, hey, this green of the eyes. But the line is saying everything above this. But what above that? Is it a certain color? Is it a certain luminosity? Yes. I want it to be this blue of the sky. So I'm going to put this eyedropper up here in the blue of the sky. Let's take a look at what we've selected. Just like before, we can turn on the mask and we can see anything that's white is selected, anything that's black is not being affected. Notice we have a bunch of these mountains that are sort of in between. We don't want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to change the chrominance, bring that to the right, and the luminance, bring that to the right. Aha, that's what we want. So things that are similar in color, similar in brightness. So we don't want all the mountains, we just want the sky. You can see here that the mountains are black and the sky is white, meaning we're working on the sky, not the mountains. And then we're fading out that between these two lines. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'm also going to double click the control line and rename that sky. So if I have multiple control points, I know what's what. Okay, now that I've done that, anything that I do inside of this filter is only going to be applied to the area that I've selected. So let's take the brightness down and immediately you see, oh, there is a cloud up there. Let's take up this, that's our contrast. Maybe we'll take contrast only, that's pretty good. Our saturation is too much blue, too much blue. Let's take that down. Yeah, to about 50% or something. So it's just not overwhelming. And then I think our shadows and highlights, maybe bring our shadows up just a bit. That's pretty good. And then we can see before and after. Look at how much we've changed that. So one of the problems with this is right over here on the right hand side, you can still see that we're affecting the tops of the mountains and we don't want that. Here's another bonus feature with selective adjustments. They talk to each other if you have more than one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a control point just to tell the control line, hey, don't do anything in this area. So it's another way that we can use to say, this is something we should add or this is something we should subtract. It's really simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. We're going to use a different kind of control point. This is called a neutral control point. It's saying in this area, don't apply anything. Don't do anything. It's neutral. It's Switzerland. So it's got a little minus there. So I can click on that, bring it out to these mountains, click there, and I'll bring this a little bit. And then I have an opacity. In other words, how much of neutral do you want? So I'm going to bring that up to about 20-30%. And notice that we've undone what the control line did to the top of that mountain. And so you can see that's without it, that's with it. We've restored that. I'll rename this to mountain. That looks pretty good. And that's all there is to it. With our control points, we have been able to affect the sky really quickly, make some neutral selections to say don't affect this part, and that's all there is to it. We're going to be doing a lot with control points as we go forward in the other classes, so buckle your seatbelts because we have a lot to cover as we go forward. We've just dipped our toe in the pool of the control point goodness. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to talk about how this software works with other applications, because we can get some bonus functionality if we pair the Nik Collection with Photoshop or Lightroom Classic or other applications. So I want to take a look at that right now. I'm going to focus on the two applications that most creatives and photographers use to edit their images: Adobe Lightroom Classic and Adobe Photoshop. Now, when you install the Nik Collection, all of the things that I'm going to show you, all the plugins and the tools are installed automatically. We're going to start in Lightroom Classic, and I'm using just a catalog that I happen to have on my hard drive. It's not included in the workshop files, unfortunately, but you can follow along with any Lightroom catalog that you have, and we can see how this works. So what we're going to do here is I have this image of Carissa. I'd like to edit this in the Nik Collection. From within Lightroom, I can do this in one of two ways. I can go up to the menu at the top and click Photo, and then we have Edit In, and then you can see that I have the entire Nik Collection there. Or I can just right click on the image itself and it's the same exact dialog box. So it works really, really well. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to right click, and what I want to do is I want to convert this to a black and white image. So I'm going to select Silver Effects. Before I do this, let me explain what's about to happen in Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic is going to take my image, if it's a RAW file or a TIFF file, whatever it is, it's going to take the settings, the adjustments I've made in Lightroom, it's going to apply those and export the file as a TIFF file, and then open that TIFF file in whatever Nik application I've selected. Then I can edit that image in the Nik software, whatever app that I've selected, and I want to make sure I use non-destructive editing. When I save that file, it's going to automatically be re-imported into Lightroom Classic and show up alongside the original image. So I'm going to have two images. So let me show you. We're going to go again, right click, edit in, Silver Effects. By default here, you're going to get some options. For this one, because it's a virtual copy, I only have one, but with others, you'll be able to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, or you can edit the original file if it's a TIFF file. And so right now we're just going to say edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, but these file output options are important. You want to make sure that you choose TIFF, a TIFF file for maximum compatibility. The color space, I'm going to use ProPhoto RGB. You can use whatever color space, that's the one I recommend. 16 bits is absolutely recommended. I would go with the default resolution. It will default to whatever your camera has used, and then no compression at all. I will click edit. It's going to automatically open Nik Silver Effects or whichever Nik app that you chose, and then it's going to pop in here. There it is. Okay, now to make this really easy, I have a custom preset that I've made. So it's a black and white conversion with a frame. Okay, so I've included this preset in your folder so you can use this. And so I'm going to make sure I choose non-destructive edits, and then I'm going to hit apply. So now we have a new button down here that says apply. I will apply that. It's going to save this to my hard drive, and then inside of Lightroom Classic, it's going to show up next to that original image. So if I go back to the grid view, you see here's my original, here is my edit. Well, guess what? I don't like that frame. I would like to change that frame to something else. So I can right click and say edit in and then Silver Effects. But before I do that, I want to show you some magic here. I want to go into the develop module, and I'm going to do something that's not great. I'm going to make this a sepia image. So I've changed the color temperature, and then maybe just to make this obvious, I want to make it overexposed. I'm just making this really obvious. Okay, I've made changes in Lightroom to my image that I edited in the Nik collection, but I still want to change that border. Can I do that? Yes, it's non-destructive. So I'm going to go back to my grid, right click, and I'm going to say edit in Silver Effects. That's what I edited this in. Now here's where that option comes into play. Do I want to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments? No, because if I do, it's going to save a new TIFF image, and it's going to bring in that overexposed, warmed up image with all my non-destructive edits applied. I don't want to do that. I want to edit the original TIFF file in Silver Effects. So I'm going to do that. You're asking yourself, you're way ahead of me. What happens to the stuff I just did in Lightroom? I will show you. This is magic. So here we are in Silver Effects. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to change that border to something else. I'm going to change it to, this. There we go. Something more. There we go. It's a black border. I'll change that size so it really shows up. There we go. A totally different border. Non-destructive. Apply. We are back in Lightroom Classic, and take a look. There is our image with the changes we made in the develop module. In fact, if I go over, you can still see there's our wacky settings. I'll bring that back to 0 so we can see the good version of this. But look, the border that we applied in Nik Silver Effects is there, the new border. So we were able to go from Lightroom into Nik Silver Effects, make some changes, bring it back in, and then later, a year later, whatever, we can still go back into Nik and make adjustments. It's non-destructive as long as we have checked that box with one exception. If we edit something in one Nik app, for example, Nik Silver Effects, and then from Lightroom, we jump over and make an edit in Analog Effects or Color Effects, the changes that are made in the last app that we use are what's going to be preserved. What if we want to have several Nik apps and we want to be able to do non-destructive editing? That's where Photoshop comes in. So I'm going to go to Photoshop and I am going to go into the gold microphone one more time. Let's drag that into Photoshop to open it up. Okay, great. Now we are seeing for the first time some new things in Photoshop. Now you might not see this thing here, this Nik Collection 6 palette. If you don't, I'm going to close this and show you how to show it because you want to see this. So what we'll do here is we go to File, and then we will go to Automate. There's the Nik Collection palette. Click on that, and now you will see this palette. You can drag this around. You can click this little icon just to see the icons for the different apps. You can expand that. There's this little dash. You can click that, and it hides it down in the lower left-hand corner. You can click that to bring it back around. You want to have this out. So the cool thing about this is it adds new features to Photoshop and extends the features of the Nik Collection by adding functionality with smart filters. And also, if I click this little triangle, you're starting to see these different little squares with words in them of filters and presets. I'm going to show you what all that is about here in a second. So what we want to do here is we have this TIFF image here. We've opened it up. You can see that there are two layers here. One is a healing layer because we had some dust. And so we're just going to work on this image. So we're going to play with this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go into Color Effects. I'm going to click Color Effects. It's going to open Color Effects. Once we have that open, let's just do something to this. So I'm going to go in here to my presets and let's do, oh, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. I think we have summer. Click. Okay, summer looks pretty good. That's just a preset that's built in. I like that. Maybe what we'll do here is we're going to use a little bit more warmth. That's good. Okay, the key thing here is after you've made all of your adjustments, whatever they might be, on the right-hand side, we have some options. We have Convert to Smart Object, Save Preset, which we've already talked about, Cancel, Brush, and Apply. What are these things? Let's begin with the brush. And to make this really pronounced, I'm going to make sure that this is really, really yellowy by adding the skylight filter. I'm going to hit Brush. When we return to Photoshop, by default, this palette is going to show up that says Brush Tool. Notice our image looks the same as it did before, but now we have this little brush and we can brush on whatever we did in our Nik software. Whatever app you used, you can brush this on. If you got too much, there's an eraser. Click on that eraser. You can brush that out. You can click the fill to fill in the entire thing, or you can click the delete to get rid of everything. So I'm going to just fill in the entire thing and then say apply. Notice on the right hand side we have our image, a new layer, and then we have a mask. So we can still brush on and off things if we know how to use a mask, but that's pretty much it. We want to do better than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that layer. We're going to go back into Color Effects. We're going to explore some of the other options and see the power of smart filters. So what we'll do here is we're going to go back into summer. That looks great. We're going to warm it up just like we did before. That looks great. Okay, skylight filter, bam. I'm just making stuff up as I go along. But now what I want to do is I'm going to click this Convert to Smart Object down here. This is really important. So now I only have Cancel and Apply. I'm going to hit Apply, and now what's going to happen is this is going to come in as a new layer, but it now has a smart filter, the Nik 6 Color Effects Smart Filter. Smart filters are fantastic because if I want to go back and change anything, I just double click that. It will then open Color Effects, and now all of my changes are there, and I can make this even more dramatic, even more yellow. Okay, I'm going to apply. I can do that as many times as I want, but it just gets better from there. What if I want to add some effects from a different app? Oh, and I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in Analog Effects. Analog Effects allows us to create some of those old film looks. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the camera kit. Don't worry, we haven't explained what this is yet, but I am going to add a frame on this, a really cool frame. So something that might look like this. Great. Convert to Smart Object? Yes. Apply. When I apply that, now I have another filter. So I've got Analog Effects and Color Effects, two different apps. I can go back and edit either one of those things. I can even change the order in which the filters are applied. Let me show you that. So let's go into Color. So we're going to go in there again. Now that we're in Color, I'm going to go to my filters. I'm going to go to my favorites. I'm going to click that. I've got a favorite here called Film Grain. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to make this really, really grainy. So now we have something like that. That looks pretty good. Convert to Smart Object, yes. I will apply that. Okay, now we have something that's really interesting. We have Color Effects, a filter that's happened. Analog Effects, a different filter, and then Grain. But if we go and look at this really close, there is a problem with this image. Notice that this frame has grain on it. It shouldn't have grain on it. The grain should only be on the image, not on the frame. All I have to do to fix that is go over here, drag the Color Effects under the Analog Effects, because the Analog Effects is where we added the frame. And now what's going to happen is the frame will be added after the grain. And now look what happens to this frame. If we look up here, the film grain has been removed from the frame. It's not on the sides anymore. It's only on the image itself. And so by using smart filters in Photoshop, what we can do is we can use multiple Nik applications. We can mix and match the layering of how filters are applied. We can always go back and change filters from one app to the other. It's totally non-destructive across all of the Nik collection in one place. It's the most powerful way to use the collection. There's even more that we can do with the collection palette here. So the Nik collection palette allows us to quickly apply filters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete that layer. And if we go over here and look, let's go and look at the Nik 6 Color Effects, and there's a little drop down arrow here. When I do that, notice that I see these different boxes here. These are those things that I said are my favorites. So when you select something as a favorite filter or a favorite custom preset, it shows up in the collection palette. And so if you want to quickly add something, all you have to do is click that thing. So for example, let's say we want to add a frame to this. Nik Color Effects, image border is one of my favorites. I can click on that. It's going to open that in Nik Color Effects, and there is a border already applied. I can change the kind of border that I want to have applied, convert to Smart Object, and then hit apply, and it's done very quickly. We can do a different thing as well. So I'm going to delete that because we've created a smart filter. What if I just want to change that and add a border? In the collection palette itself, there's this little gearbox, and we have some options. We're going to be playing with these options as we go forward to the more advanced classes. But right now, what I want you to look at is this option here. Where do you want to apply your favorite filter or preset or your last edit? I'm going to say in Photoshop. So before we were applying those in the Nik collection, I'm just going to say in Photoshop. So now if I hit that same thing, image borders, it's going to open Nik Color Effects. It's going to apply that and then instantly bring it into Photoshop as a new layer. And so it's not non-destructive, it just does it really fast. But if you know that there's a look that you want to just apply, you can. So those are the options. So if you're wondering what these little drop-down boxes are, anything that you add as a favorite is going to show up there so you can get to it quickly to either edit it in the Nik Collection non-destructively or just to apply it in Photoshop itself. We're going to talk about these other options as we go forward to the more advanced classes, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Wow, we have covered a lot of stuff, but at this point, you should be able to jump into any of the applications and use them. You're a beginner at this point. You know the interface, you know about custom presets and filters, and you can see how to navigate and add things and adjust those, create your own presets, save files, use Photoshop or Lightroom Classic. It's been a ton of fun. We're about to look at each and every app individually so we can explore the advanced features. You can go from the beginner to an advanced user of the Nik Collection. Now, I recommend that you go in the order that we're presenting these because there are things that you might learn in color effects that apply to analog effects or apply to silver effects. We're going to be sort of peeling the onion, so layer by layer by layer. There are going to be little tips and tricks hidden there that can apply to any app that you use, but the choice is yours. We're going to start with Nik Color Effects, so I'll see you there.